Hey, how's it going, Dr. Laura Hayes? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Evan. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you on the show. I've listened to a few of your episodes, done a little bit of research on you, and I feel like we have a lot of topics in common and things that personally I want to dig deep on and pick your brain on. So I'm really excited for today's episode. Overall, I love starting all of these episodes typically off with kind of a background of what drove you into the health and wellness field. For myself personally, it was gastrointestinal issues as a child that largely shaped a lot of kind of what I'm doing now and is a big why for the work that I do. So, yeah, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing what led you into this field and all that good stuff.
Sure, happy to share. I'll try to keep it the abridged version for you. I grew up in New England, and my dad is a retired OBGYN. So, kind of grew up with medicine in my family. And my mom was a teacher, so had that service element all around me as a kid. And I was always really fascinated in humans and science. Science was sort of what I was good at, and so I think I gravitated toward that as I went through schooling and such. And then probably, later when I went to college, I had a little bit of a different path. I decided initially that I wanted to go into science-based field, or I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But then halfway through my college career, I actually pivoted and I ended up transferring to art school, actually. And I embarked on an education and then later a career in photography. So that took me to some interesting places. And eventually I kind of came back around and thought, yeah, this has been great, but I still have this need or this feeling, this value of service to others in this way. So, long story short, I, applied to medical school and I got in. I went to medical school in Boston, and then deciding on emergency medicine specifically, that came a little bit later on. There were a lot of things that appealed to me with emergency medicine. Specifically, I really enjoyed the notion of knowing a lot about everything instead of knowing everything about one main topic. So yeah, that's kind of what brought me into emergency medicine. And then over this last few years, as I'm sure you can understand and have your own stories through the COVID pandemic, I was in a leadership role for my at my hospital, and dealt with a whole series of different stressors that came about during those last few years. And eventually, my husband and I kind of started talking about ways in which we could still be of service to others, still be doctors, but what else could we offer? What else were we kind of finding was our purpose? And that led us down this little bit more health coaching and consulting realm that we're doing now. We're still both practicing emergency medicine clinically, but we have a stronger focus now on this kind of other passion of ours, and that's where we birthed our podcast, and that's been really fantastic. So yeah, that's kind of, sorry it was a little bit longer, but that's my story, and that's what brought me here today.
No, absolutely. Happy to hear it. And I'm sure that is the short version, which I thought it was actually very concise because I did a whole episode on mine. So I know there's a lot that goes into it, right? We typically see the outcomes. We don't see all of the hard work and, different forks in the roads that really took us to where we're at. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, and so you have a health coaching program, is that correct? Called Lasting Impact Wellness Group.
Yeah, that's correct. So it kind of started, we would be working in the emergency department, and patients would say to us, humbly, I guess I tell you the story humbly, that patients would say, hey, can you be my doctor? Can, you explain this in a way that was never explained to me before? Or now I understand X, Y, or Z. And a lot of times it wasn't even really pertinent to why they were in acute need at the time, why they were actually in the emergency department. But, and my husband would get the same types of comments and questions. And, again, we would come home and talk about these things. And I have a long background in yoga. I've been teaching yoga for about 25 years now. And so again, we started thinking about this of how can we start helping people be healthier and maybe avoid needing the acute sick care, or at least postponing that. So, how can we add value to people's lives before they meet us in the emergency department, essentially? And of course, things happen, things come up, emergencies are emergencies, and traumas and illness and things like that. Of course, they happen, but that was sort of the precipice for this whole next course or this next chapter in our careers and in our lives. And it's been great. I mean, even just having a podcast, Evan, I'm sure you experienced this. You just get to talk to interesting people and learn. We learn so much, as you start to embark on a new journey yourself. You learn so much in the process while you're trying to teach others about things too, which is really fascinating and neat.
Yeah, it's I'm a constant student all the time, and it's a treat having people on like you. So I can honestly just be a student and just learn. But I will say one thing I really loved hearing about. I guess I would say I think it's the 6 core concepts of your health coaching practice, and all of them were great. I love and agree with all of them, absolutely. And one of them that I really liked, and it's something I don't think you usually see in a health coaching program, is the 360 awareness, right? Like awareness of not everything about you all around you. And personally, I have my own ideas and concepts around this awareness, but I would love for you to kind of break down what that means and why that would be in a health coaching practice.
Yeah, great question. And that's honestly, in my opinion, I'm not sure what my husband Parker would say, but probably shares the same sentiment that that's the most important one. I really feel that that is the foundation for your well-being, and it encompasses a lot. So the reason we call it this 360 awareness is because it's not just about knowing yourself or taking that introspective view, learning your ins and outs, learning your intricacies, what makes you who you are, understanding your body's signals, your mind signals, how the mind and body are connected. So that's part of it. And that's the internal awareness part. But then, and a lot of researchers and studies and lay people use the term external awareness. So they differentiate between internal awareness, which is what I just mentioned, but then external awareness. And we don't mind the term external awareness, but I prefer that term expanded awareness or 360-degree awareness, because it's not just taking the view from the outside in. It's really about widening that aperture, looking all around and seeing, how are you perceived by others? I mean, your words, your actions, those impact all the people around you every day, every time you have an interaction, every time you open your mouth. So how are those impacting other people? And a lot of people have one or the other. Maybe they're very self-aware internally. They understand what they stand for. They know their values, their belief systems, and they understand their physical cues, their emotional cues, all of those things. But that same person could be very lacking in this more expanded or 360 awareness. And then the reverse is also true. Maybe you do have a better understanding of how others perceive you, but you don't really understand those connections within yourself. So again, that's kind of a brief description of it, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it. I can elaborate more, but that's really the crux and the foundation of it all. And we really believe that, especially from a medical background and being physicians, that's where you can understand what your body needs and what your body is trying to tell you. We talk a lot in our practice about red flags. When your body is sending you a signal, your body is putting up these little red flags saying, hey, something's going on here. I think you should be paying attention to this. And so having that deeper self-awareness is about pausing, acknowledging those red flags, seeing them for what they are, and then trying to interpret them and what they mean, and then making a plan to move forward.
Yeah. So I guess I should say my preconceived ideas and stuff on the awareness portion, mainly were definitely focused on the internal aspect of it. One thing I always talk about is in terms of digestive health, because that's something I have dealt with and it's something I focus with. And realistically, I think your body is a feedback system, and it's constantly letting you know when, you're hot, you're going to sweat, right? When you're cold, you're going to shiver. And when you eat a food that doesn't agree with you, you're gonna have an upset stomach. You're gonna, have to be running to the bathroom, whatever it might be, right? And so that was my idea. Was like with awareness, I see, and I was in this boat where you would eat these foods that tasted delicious, but then you would just kind of like ignore the aftermath. It was like your body is speaking to you literally, like this is a discomfort because you did something that was, not meant to be absorbed or does not agree with the body, whatever it may be. And, I know so many people personally who still deal with this, but to them it's just normal. And it's just kind of like, well, hey, when you eat food, you get bloated and blah, blah, blah. And so to me, one of the biggest things is trying to get people to be aware of when they're eating. And for me, it's slowing down, not eating so fast. I used to eat like someone was going to steal my food kind of deal. So I really had to learn to slow down and be a little bit more present with the food I was eating. Maybe not mixing so many foods at the same time to kind of start dialing in on what it was that was affecting me. And so, yeah, we can obviously go on that topic, but I love the external portion of awareness as well, because as we both know, relationships are, and it's also another core concept there for you, but relationships are huge. They're one of the most important factors. We see it in the blue zones where it plays a huge role in our longevity and ultimately, I mean, just adding value to your life as well, right? So if you are not aware of how you are coming off to everyone else around you, you might not have very good relationships, So I think that was really nice. I really enjoyed that you added that piece in there.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is when you think about your internal awareness, you made me think of the phrase connecting the dots. It's really trying to assess and analyze what your body's telling you. You mentioned, you eat something and then maybe you're in the bathroom 20 minutes later. Well, being more self-aware is the ability to pause and take a look and see if there is a connection. Maybe there's not a connection. It's not to say every time you get the runs, it's because of that one thing you ate, but looking for the connections there. And similarly, I guess I could extrapolate that to the external awareness piece too. It's kind of understanding why you may be getting the consistent reaction that you get from people when you think you're saying something one way or coming across a certain way, but maybe you're not getting the promotion that you really feel you deserve, or you're pissing off a lot of people at work or your family or something. And being able to make that connection of, well, hey, wait a minute, why does this seem to keep happening to me? And just being able to pause, and it's more about even taking a more of an objective view, if you will, taking your own kind of emotion and attachment out of it and saying, okay, let me just, again, widen that aperture and see things a little bit more objectively as a whole.
Yeah, and it's a really difficult thing to do. It's easy for us. Yeah, it's easy to point fingers, right? And place blame elsewhere. It's a lot harder to take a look at yourself and say, now hold on, could I be doing something wrong? Because obviously, pointing a finger requires no change on your end, and so you can continue doing what you have been doing. But whereas if you actually turn it around and look at yourself, it's a lot more work, and I think that's important. We should do the self work, and it starts with that awareness. So yeah, I really loved that one, and I also love that you included a finance concept in there as well. For me, I think I don't usually talk about finances too much either, and I know you mentioned you're like, hey, yeah, we're not like financial experts or anything, but it does play a massive role in health as well, because that can be directly related to, for example, a stress response, right? That could be activating the sympathetic nervous system at various times in the day when you're worrying about paying certain bills or, wherever the money needs to be. So I think it's excellent that you added that in there. And is that the main reason you added in there, was because of like that stress response, or what did you feel was the reason for adding in the finance portion?
Yeah, it's mostly that. It's how our financial stability, or our impression of our own financial stability, really impacts the other parts of our health. As you mentioned, if you are feeling like you don't have financial stability, for example, well, then maybe you are going to be putting in the extra hours at work, and that's going to lead to more stress. And reduce sleep and burnout. There's also the consideration of the socioeconomics of it too, of how can you really eat healthy or make more conscious food choices when you are having to be more aware and cognizant of your financial practices, and maybe you can't afford to eat organic or you can't afford certain things and your default is to hit up the fast food restaurant that is really affordable for a lot of people. So it's really, and again, I'm glad you prefaced this with saying that yes, we do not claim to offer financial advice, but we wanted to acknowledge that it's a part of well-being. It just is. And I think if we hadn't acknowledged it, then it would almost sort of be the elephant in the room. So it allows us with our clients and people we work with to say, hey, let's just think about this piece. We don't have to dive into it. We're not going to be your financial planners or figure out what's lacking or what's in excess. It's just a matter of saying, hey, we acknowledge that this may or may not be playing a role in your particular well-being. And then how can we work with you to optimize that part of your well-being as well?
Yeah, and I truly do think it is such an important aspect of life, and it plays a massive role in our health. And in terms of stress too, I think it's kind of this like domino effect where if money is an issue, then it stresses you out, and then maybe you're not sleeping as well at night, and then now you're not sleeping well at night, and and now you're not getting the recovery benefits, and you're not getting all this, and so it's they're all obviously connected, but I think really a key core concept is the stress level, and this is personally a topic I'm very big on. I love talking about it, and I know you're well educated on it. So would you mind walking us through just kind of the role stress plays in our life? I mean, I know not all stress is bad, but yeah, please just take the floor and show what role stress has been playing in the health of everyone, basically.
Sure. Wow, what a huge topic, right? um, and I come at stress from many different levels. I'm human, of course, like we all are, and we all experience stress to some degree. I also, I think, have a somewhat unique perspective in that I am on the front lines of emergency medicine, which is its whole another stressful situation, and kind of how I've learned to navigate that over the years. But stress, like you said, it's a part of life. It's a part of everybody, and not all stress is bad. When we think about stress, acute stress is different than chronic stress, and this is something that I'm sure your listeners have contemplated before or heard you talk about even. But acute stress is not bad. That's what helps us move. That stress response is what gets you in motion. It gets you doing something. It produces an action. So acute stress isn't bad. That's what helps us get out of bed in the morning. It's what helps you put one foot in front of the other when you're afraid to go out on stage and give your presentation. It's what helps you get dressed and walk out the door for a first date. Those little surges of acute stress are good, and they're helpful to us even. And it's the chronic stress situations that are detrimental to our health, that have long-term health effects on our bodies, on our minds, on everything. And I guess I can kind of rewind and talk a little bit about kind of how that stress response happens, if you allow me the floor to go through a little bit of the physiology. So essentially, your body senses a threat, and that can come in many different forms. You can see something, hear something, feel something. One of your senses picks up on a threat. And then that threat is interpreted by the amygdala, which is a part of your brain that processes emotion. And once it's processed that as a threat, it essentially starts this cascade of neurotransmitters and chemical release throughout your body that tells your body, you need to do something. There's an action that needs to be done right now to protect you from this threat. And your hypothalamus kicks into gear. It sends signals to the pituitary gland, which sends signals to the adrenal gland. And then your adrenal gland starts pumping out adrenaline or epinephrine. And then that's sort of the acute, really fast acting stress hormone that comes out. And then after that happens and produces all of its effects to rev you up, then cortisol starts to be produced when your body says, okay, this threat is not going away. I need a little more oomph. So it's really, when we talk about the stress response, and there are more players involved, but the two main ones are going to be your adrenaline and your cortisol. And the effects that that has on your body, we can all imagine, right? If we all pause for right now and just think of a stressful situation, and bring some to mind, you can almost even start to feel that feeling come on. And again, it's a protective mechanism. We're designed as very complex creatures, and we're designed for these things to protect us. So, this sympathetic response, or this drive and the stress response, is really designed to shunt blood to the necessary organs that get you to move. So it's going to take blood away from your digestive tract. It's going to shunt it out to your muscles, to your heart, to make your heart pump faster. And it's going to constrict some blood vessels and vasodilate others. It's going to make your respiratory rate increase, so you're breathing faster, your pupils dilate. It can show up as people can get goosebumps, or all kinds of sort of that adrenaline surge that we can all relate to and identify. But the thing about stress is, if you don't allow it time for that system to come down or neutralize or regulate in some way, and it stays in this sort of on state all the time, that's when it becomes problematic. That's when our physical bodies start to say, look, this isn't good for me. You can't do that forever. And we see that come up in our stressful lives these days. We are walking around with a to-do list that's a mile long, and we have tons of roles and responsibilities that are with us all the time. And gosh, just even being connected better to one another, having the internet, having social media, all of that stuff, it's wonderful in so many ways when it comes to connection, but it's added a lot more chronic stress to a lot of people. So I guess I'll kind of stop there and let you comment or chime in or ask a question. But really, when we're talking about stress being harmful to us or harmful to our health and our well-being, it's that chronic state of stress that we're referring to, not those acute stress states that are helpful and purposeful and need to be there. It's that chronic, shoulders up a little bit, closer to your ears all the time, the things that we can all imagine.
And so, what would you say are some of the commonly associated health risks with chronic stress?
Good question. So many. um, yeah, everything. I mean, if you think about the short-term effects, poor sleep, poor interpersonal relationships, poor food choices, you know, those are kind of the more immediate things. But then long term, stress has effect on our cardiovascular system, on our arteries, our heart, our insulin and glucose regulation. It has a impact on our immune system and our ability to heal our wounds and avoid getting sick. So, it really affects every single system in our body. Stress has been linked to certain types of cancers. It's been linked to anxiety and depression. A lot of chronic stress can also play a role now, we're discovering, in Alzheimer's and diseases that people develop later in life. So it's really something that has become kind of a buzzworthy topic nowadays, but it really does have lasting impact on your health and on your life if it's left unmanaged, really, for too long.
Yeah, and so thank you for sharing that. That's like the best explanation I think I've heard on the show. So very, very nicely put. I was gonna say, in terms of people who are super chronically stressed, I think and I'm no professional here, but people that I feel are chronically stressed that I know in my life, a lot of them don't even know that they're chronically stressed. I think they've just had this as their baseline for such a long enough period of time that, once again, it's their normal. It's the person that's eating the food that's causing them all the stomach issues, and they just never pay mind to it because they think it's just it's something that happens when you're digesting food. And so I see that with a lot of people personally that, once again, I can't, I'm not testing them, but I see it. Like you said, shoulders are up here. If you ever were to squeeze their shoulders, they're probably like rocks. They are breathing in their chest. They're never taking a full belly breath ever. You can just completely see it even in their reactions and stuff. And so What would you say is the best way for someone to recognize that they're chronically stressed? And then, if they are, what would you recommend in terms of trying to lower that stress?
Wow, well it's a hard one. I mean, as you mentioned, a lot of us, and I myself included, I don't get this right all the time, and I have certainly struggled with times in my life where I have been chronically stressed. I mean, I mentioned COVID earlier. I mean, being an emergency physician and a director and chief of my department for those 3 years, that was a whole new level of stress, and it was chronic. It was 3 years straight, pretty much, and almost resistant to my usual mitigation and regulatory mechanisms, despite my efforts at them. So, it's hard to recognize, and a lot of us kind of go through, we're on this autopilot mode. We have those mile long tasks and to-do lists, like I mentioned, but we feel like we're managing them. And on a superficial level, we are managing them. We're getting the things done that need to be done. We're showing up at work. We're remembering the birthday. We're bringing the kids to school. We're making it to the after school events. We're getting the groceries. We're keeping our household tidy. We're doing all of the things that are on that list and then some. So it feels like we're managing them. We think we are, but that's also potentially the person who is more irritable. They're not showing up when the friends are having a get together. They're not sleeping great at night, or maybe they're sleeping okay, but it's because they're now having a glass of wine or a beer or a cocktail every night before they go to bed. And I guess I would say at some point, living in that chronic state of chronic stress is not sustainable. Something is going to pop up. That red flag somewhere is going to show up. And it's just a matter of being willing to see it and being open to taking a pause in your life and saying, okay, let me step back and think about these parts of myself and what's happening. I think, Evan, honestly, one of the drivers for my interest in this well-being space, if you will, and my husband's too, is, healthcare in general lacks resources in this area. You know, most primary care doctors that people see, you're going to maybe see your primary care doctor once a year for your regular checkup. They're going to order the basic labs on you. They're going to ask you, how much alcohol do you drink? Do you smoke? How much exercise are you getting? But in reality, unfortunately, the way the system is today, they have about 15 minutes to spend with you. And if you're seeing your doctor more regularly than that, then that might mean that's because you have an illness or you're having an acute need that you need to see them for. But there has not, until probably the last decade or so, has not been a lot of focus on preventative medicine and preventative care. And for me and a lot of others, that's where the space of well-being comes in. It's not about necessarily what disease process do you have or what disease process are you at risk for. Yes, those are important, but it's how can all of these other parts that make you who you are, all these other aspects or arenas of your life, how are they either working for you or working against you right now at this moment in your life? And then how can we adopt some sustainable practices so that you can live healthy longer, right? It's not just about increasing our longevity and living longer. It's about increasing our health span and extending the number of healthy years that we have on this earth. So sorry, I think I got off topic there, but again, I think it's more about just stepping back, taking a pause, and I think even the sort of core concepts of well-being, you can use those as a little inventory or a checklist to just say, how am I doing on my self-awareness? How am I doing on my fitness? How am I doing my nutrition? What are my emotional and relationship circles like these days? Am I feeling socially connected? Am I feeling emotionally satisfied with where I am with my relationships? You can even ask yourself about your financial stability. And then, the other one that I don't think we've touched on at all, but, how is my sleep? Am I giving myself some time to recover, to rejuvenate, to let all of these processes and things that are happening in my body throughout the day settle in at night when I'm sleeping and really do their work behind the scenes? So I think well-being and these concepts of well-being act and serve as a good checklist for people. And that's Probably. I mean, gosh, I think if you just checked in with yourself once every few months and ran that list of those 6 things, you'd probably be pretty good.
I think very good, because not many people are checking those. And I was gonna say for checking stress levels, and this is just what had worked for me personally. I had a phase of my life where I was just religious about meditating like multiple times a week. For a while there, it was every single morning, and it was incredible. Like the benefits are insane. Highly, highly recommend. And I had taken a break away from it. I was getting super busy, and as they say, it's the person that's the most busy that needs the most meditation. And so, sure enough, sat down for a mindfulness practice. It was a tea ceremony, and during it, I noticed that first off, my thoughts were all over the place. It was like hectic, 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 all the things I had to do. And I actually started physically sweating and like feeling so antsy. Like I had to get up and go do that stuff right then and there. And once that happened, I then was, I looked at myself and I was like, okay, hold up. Why are you feeling like this right now? Because this practice is only going to be like 20 minutes, and so in the 20 minutes that you're here, you couldn't accomplish all this list that you're trying to do, right? Like it's literally going to make no difference in your day. And so then I sat with it for a bit and realized like, okay, like you're stressed. You just do some deep breathing, and was able to kind of work through it. And for me, that moment of like no longer going through that mile-long checklist and just sitting and actually paying attention to my inner being and not giving that energy and focus outwards to my phone or my computer or my work or whatever it may be, that gave me the opportunity to be like, hey, dude, you've been doing a lot. You need to like chill for a second. And so that was for me my personal experience in recognizing, not necessarily, I don't know if I would say it was chronic stress, but it was definitely a level of stress.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point because you said you were meditating a lot, and I mean it becomes a practice. It's called a practice for a reason, and you have to allow yourself some grace and some self-compassion to say, I'm going to start this practice and I'm not going to get it perfect every time, but let's see if this helps. And one thing that I recommend to my patients, to my clients, to my friends, whoever will listen, is to just start with a really small digestible nugget. Like take 30 seconds of your day and just sit, just be by yourself, take a pause. I tell my kids, I use the term take a beat. Like I don't know where I got that from, but I just tell them like, girls, just like, let's just take a beat, and we just kind of sit and it's like 30 seconds or a minute, where you can just like be quiet, have some semblance of just being with yourself. And honestly, if you just did that for 30 seconds, I mean, you could set the little timer on your watch or your phone or something. And if you get to the end of that 30 seconds and you feel like, oh my gosh, that was impossible. I mean, it's only 30 seconds, So I would encourage that person who gets to the end of 30 seconds and feels like, oh my gosh, that was just brutal. Well, that probably is a practice that you should try to incorporate a little bit more. And maybe that's your sign or your signal that you're running on, adrenaline all day long. And maybe you need to just sort of slow it down a little bit. And I think, I talked in one of the podcast episodes about just finding that practice that works for you. But it starts simple. I mean, we all go to the bathroom every day, multiple times. And we are, and myself included, I'll include myself in the we here. We are so used to just grabbing our phone, we go to the bathroom, we check our email, we're looking at social media, we're doing whatever. And like, I have to really remind myself to not do that. Like, why can't I just go to the bathroom for 5 minutes and not have my phone? So I've really tried to incorporate that. And again, it sounds silly, but I've tried to incorporate that into my regular practice of engineering little moments of mindfulness throughout my day where I can just be present and then see what's coming up for me. And the other practice that I think is helpful when I teach my yoga class, I oftentimes will give them a little challenge at the end or a little assignment and say, okay, when you do this, when you go home, I want you to try this. And one of the things that I've recommended, and a lot of people have actually given me feedback like, wow, that was amazing. I don't ever think to do that, is I encourage them to drive home with no music and put the windows down. And it's it's amazing. It feels so invigorating and refreshing, and you feel so connected to the world. And I mean, again, it sounds ridiculous sometimes when I hear myself say it, but try it. If you've never done that, it's so tempting. You maybe get like 2 minutes into your drive and then you want to put the radio on or you want to turn on the podcast or something. But if you can kind of really force yourself to just resist that urge, and especially when the weather's great, and I mean, there's something about that that will bring you into a state of mindfulness and being present. And it's once you start practicing those moments, you'll find that they're a little bit easier to incorporate into your life.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to note that all of these distractions that are fighting for our attention, even if we notice that they're doing that or not, like you were saying, even just the radio in your car, right? Like it's just a background noise, but it's background noise. And the access to having music at the snap of your fingers was not there that long ago. The radio, I mean, you had to go physically see someone perform music in front of you to actually hear that or be able to sing yourself. So I think it's very important for us to know that a lot of the stuff we're going through right now, in my personal opinion, obviously I don't know because I can't travel back in time, but if you were to go back 150 years, it would be very different in terms of what I would think is the stress levels, because you didn't have as many things on your mind all the time. It was a little bit more presence based, I think.
Yeah, it's that notion of kind of just bringing it back to basics. And I think even with nutrition and fitness, sometimes you just bring it back to the basics, and that's a great place to start. What kinds of things were we eating back then? And we didn't have all this processed stuff. And even from a fitness standpoint, I mean, just go for a walk outside. It's great. It's so good for you. Don't sometimes I think as humans, we tend to overcomplicate things, and sometimes simple can be really nice and really healthy and keep us well.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing that had came to my mind and I forgot to bring up was also the impact of stress on our hormone levels too. Because, I know especially, with men and women, but I know very specifically with women, there is a very big, I would say, like, yeah, just a big issue with the hormone levels and being correct. I mean, I've come across so many people who have told me that they have had, incorrect hormone levels. And of course, being overly stressed and, taxing the adrenal glands and all that, that's going to be playing a massive role as well. And I don't even know where I was going with that one, but I just was like, I wanted to make that point because I think it's a massive one.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think it underscores the point that it's all connected. You can't separate the mind and the body. It's all connected in there. And all of the choices that you make throughout your life are going to affect some other part of you. And so I think I'm glad you brought that up because it underscores that point that it's all connected.
Yeah, and then on top of that too, you're a mother, and obviously raising kids, while it is a great joy of life, it comes with its level of stress as well. And is there anything going through even pregnancy or even having kids that you found was beneficial for you in managing your stress, or even just like tips in general for staying healthy and keeping the body healthy, both mentally, emotionally, physically, because they all play a role. And we always talk about, okay, take your prenatal, while you're pregnant or trying to conceive. And then afterwards, it's kind of like, all right, all about the baby. Like mother gets pushed to the side, and I think that it is shifting, and it's not always like that. I'm generalizing that, but what were some like practices you found to be beneficial?
Gosh, well, pregnancy is such a whirlwind of emotion and physical changes. It's just gigantic transformation in so many ways. And I think the key point I would make is that the healthier you are, the better equipped you are to care for your child and your family. And that means during pregnancy as well. I mean, I meet patients all the time as an ER physician who are pregnant and they're going through something, and they're very worried about the baby, and of course we have to consider the baby, but one thing we often talk about is, look, we need to make sure that you are the healthiest you can be right now. Right now we need to take care of you so that you can continue with this pregnancy, so that you can continue to be successful in this process. And so again, I think I would say that that's kind of the main point is, you got to take care of mom. And once, if mom is taken care of and mom is healthy and mom's well-being is accounted for, then that's what's best for the child. And, in the postpartum period in particular, gosh, I think this would be a much bigger topic than you want to get into right now, but just to keep it generalized as you introduced it in that way. But, mom's well-being is not just about self-care or, allowing mom to go have a 15-minute nap or something. Yes, those things are important, but it's really about mom feeling supported and feeling acknowledged and accepting of her choices, what she feels is best for herself or her baby. There's so much guilt and pressure and expectation and comparisons that come with motherhood in general, that it's a space that I'm glad is gaining a little more attention, I think, from just the world and society and even the healthcare system. But yeah, I think we probably all as a society need to give a little more attention to the well-being of mothers. And I actually, Evan, if you'll let me land you with a shameless plug here, part of what we do at Lasting Impact, I have developed this kind of side program. This is my baby, pun intended, and it's called Changing Grace. And it's actually a well-being program designed specifically for moms, and it focuses on maternal well-being and takes into account some of these pillars of well-being, but it really more so helps them move through a place where they may feel stuck in their identity or role as a mother. And while it's an important role, it helps them to recognize that they are more than that, and have a lot to offer themselves, their family, and the world around them. So yeah, pretty passionate about that topic if you can't tell. So I'm glad you brought it up, but yeah.
Yeah, no, and also, by the way, feel free to take the floor on this topic. I mean, I think it's extremely important. I would love to hear you go on about it. And even just recently here, I was listening to a podcast and, talking about how like the shame and guilt around certain aspects of giving birth and being a mother and all this. And the podcast I was listening to, they were talking about how, 6 months after having a baby, everyone's like, okay, when are you going to get back in shape or lose the weight and all this, right? And it's like, first off, just gave birth to a literal human being living here, right? Like giving life. So that's the first part of it. But also what I thought was interesting was they found that up to 6 months after giving birth, and I can't remember if it was the caloric demand or like nutrient demand, but it was at or exceeding the levels of like world-class athletes. Your body is demanding so much, a love and energy, and then we're over here like, oh, we need to get back in shape. No. You need to take care of your body and give it what it needs. Like, this is 6 months after, just giving birth. So yeah, you go where you want with that. But also, if you want to continue down the path that you were going, feel free to as well.
No, I mean, it's motherhood and postpartum and all that is a different experience for every woman. Of course, it's very unique, and each woman has her own challenges and struggles. Certainly when it comes to your physical health or your caloric needs, as you stated, some of that does depend on if you're breastfeeding or not breastfeeding, for example. There is more, you need more calories if you're burning them at that rate that you are when you're breastfeeding. But it's just that transition from never being pregnant to being pregnant, and then that transition afterward, it's a complete transformation in your body. I mean, your hormones are all over the place, and your body has just done something that still blows my mind. Even the fact that I've done it multiple times, it's like crazy to think that that actually can happen. So, you know, there's definitely room for a lot more self compassion and kindness to ourselves when we are women going through that state. And again, I think a lot of it, what I would like to see, and I think a lot of other women would like to see, is there being more opportunity to have discussions like this, to talk about, what is actually going on. What are those, what are the expectations that we place on ourselves, but also society places upon us? And, how do we counteract that? How do we say, look, that's not realistic, or that's your opinion, it's not mine. And it's an interesting space. I'm not. Are you familiar with the word matrescence? Have you heard of that word, Evan? So I'm not a specialist in this area, but there's this new accepted term called matrescence, and essentially it's this term that describes the period of time after a woman gives birth and becomes a mother. And it sounds sort of phonetically similar to adolescence. And in adolescence, that, as you know, describes your transition from being a kid to an adult, essentially. And how our bodies go through so much physical change at that time. We go through so much hormonal change at that time, emotional change, right? It's such a huge time in our lives where so much is happening at once. And if you think about it, so what matrescence, or it's called matrescence, what that describes is really this period of time in a woman's life after she's been pregnant and then given birth, where she's also going through a lot of physical changes, a lot of hormonal changes, emotional changes, where again, things are kind of all over the place again. And I bring that up to say, sometimes when we label something, or we can give it a word, or we can give it an identity, it can open the door for discussion and research and bringing more awareness to the topic itself. So, yeah, you probably will hear that word coming up, more so over the next few years, I would think. But I thought it was interesting when I first learned about it, and how a lot of similarities between adolescence and matrescence in a lot of ways.
I absolutely love that, and thank you for enlightening me on that term. I just wrote it down, and I'll probably go get a specific definition for it, because that's awesome. I think that's great, and yeah, like you said, putting a word to something can open up dialogue around it and kind of almost allow us to place our the feelings and emotions within a term. And so yeah, that was really cool. I love that. Yeah, no, the whole topic of motherhood and giving birth, like you said, it is absolutely fascinating. Requires another 3 podcast episodes because it is truly that fantastic, and that still probably wouldn't do it justice. But nonetheless, we are coming towards the end of this episode, and this is always the worst part of the episode for me, because it's, I love having these conversations. And like I said, I've got my notebook here. I am a student during these, taking notes. So thank you very much for coming on the show. And I would love to open the platform for you now to leave our guests with any last minute thoughts, any takeaways, as well as obviously please share where people can find you, your podcast, your program, all of that, because I know you have a lot to share. And I will absolutely be sure to put it in the show notes so everyone can access it quickly. But if you want to just take the time and really kind of go through that, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. And as I mentioned, I think before we started recording, being in this podcasting world has been just so fascinating and interesting for me too, because you just get to meet people you may never meet in life. So it's been great, and it's been awesome chatting with you. We do have our own podcast, which I would love to direct people toward. It's called Lasting Impact Wellness, and it's hosted by myself and my husband. And we've interviewed some really fascinating guests. We interview sometimes other medical professionals about specific health and well-being topics, but it's all very relatable and digestible, approachable, and we try to be pretty darn science-based based and outcomes based and things like that. So please go check that out. That's on Spotify or Apple or Google, wherever you get your podcasts. And there's also a link to it on our website, which is just lastingimpactwellness.com. And we are always open to meeting people and talking to people. So you could certainly include our email address, which is just info@lastingimpactwellness.com. And we've got some great programs that focus on optimizing well-being and for individuals, organizations, and as I mentioned, my little side baby project, which I'm really passionate about, called Changing Grace. So yeah, thanks again, Evan, and thanks for the opportunity for letting me put that all out there too. That's great.
Oh, absolutely. And no, I can hear the passion in your voice about, yeah, your little baby. I love that. And I think it's so important. Like you were just saying, it's the conversation that needs to open up, and it's really the work that needs to be done. You know, it's a pain point currently, and it's so cool to see that you're stepping up and doing something about it. So, no, I love that. And who knows, maybe in the future we'll have you back on the show, because I feel like there's still like so much to cover, and I really enjoyed having you on. So truly, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Evan. Anytime.
Alrighty, y'all. You know the motto of the show. It is do everything with good intentions and connect to your elements. Have a great one, y'all. Peace.